Let's begin by defining our topic. According to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, a workplace emergency is an unforeseen situation that threatens your employees, customers, or the public, disrupts or shuts down your operations, or causes physical or environmental damage. It's important to remember that workplace emergencies may be natural or man-made. Dangerous weather patterns, civil disturbances, fire hazards, and more can all attribute to a workplace emergency situation. While these types of disasters won't give you an early warning, you can always be prepared by planning ahead. A tragic example of a workplace emergency can be found by looking to the small town of Hamlet, North Carolina on September 3, 1991. Imperial Foods Poultry Processing was the largest employer in Hamlet. With 90 employees on duty at 8:30 in the morning, a faulty hydraulic line ruptured, causing one of the massive deep fryers to spontaneously ignite. Fueled by hot oil, the fire spread rapidly, filling the building with thick smoke. Employees scrambled to evacuate but found many of the exits were locked, including one specifically designated fire exit. Since the phones inside the building could not be used, the owner's son drove to the fire department to inform them of the fire, but failed to tell them about the workers that were inside. Later attempts at search and rescue were compromised due to the heavy smoke and heat. 25 workers lost their lives, and another 54 suffered injuries and long-term effects. So how do you protect yourself and your employees? The best way is to prepare your response to an emergency situation before it happens. Take time to brainstorm some worst-case scenarios and identify possible solutions. Once you've identified potential emergencies, it is time to develop your emergency action plan. An emergency action plan covers designated actions that employers and employees must take to ensure everyone's safety during a workplace emergency. When developing your plan, it's a good idea to include information for all potential emergency situations. One way to address this is by conducting a hazard assessment. Tailor your plan to your specific work site. If you have more than one location, ensure that each facility has their own plan. You can always start with a master plan, then acclimate it for each location. Include both your management team and your employees in the process. Commitment and support from all levels of the organization is critical to the plan's success. At a minimum, your emergency action plan should include contact information for any key individuals at your company, a preferred method for reporting any emergencies, a plan for retrieving employee medical information, evacuation policies and procedures, procedures for employees who may be required to perform critical operations, rescue and medical duties for any workers assigned to perform them, and designated assembly locations and procedures to account for all employees and visitors after an evacuation. The type of evacuation will vary depending on the kind of emergency. For instance, you may want employees to evacuate to a designated area inside the building if threatened by a tornado, but evacuate to an exterior assembly point in the case of a fire. As the employer, it is your decision regarding whether or not fire extinguishers should be used during an evacuation. If so, you must provide annual hands-on training to the employees authorized to use the fire extinguishers. Be sure employees have access to evacuation maps with arrows that designate their specific exit routes. These maps should include locations of exits, assembly points, and equipment such as fire extinguishers and first aid kits. Confusion in the assembly areas can lead to delays in rescue efforts. An immediate head count should be taken after the evacuation, and the names and last known locations of anyone not accounted for should be passed on to the official in charge. Make sure that employees know not to go to their vehicles or leave the premises during an emergency. To be sure emergency responders are prepared to act in accordance with your emergency action plan, invite local department representatives to tour your facility. If you make major changes to the facility or the location of any hazardous materials, these individuals should be contacted and invited back out to reassess the layout. When law enforcement arrives, remember, remain calm and follow instructions. Keep your hands visible at all times. Avoid making quick movements toward the officers and do not stop to ask questions. They may shout commands or physically move people for their safety. Once you have reached a safe location or an assembly point, you will likely be held in that area until all witnesses have been identified and questioned. Do not leave until law enforcement authorities have instructed you to do so. Employers must provide early warning for employees to safely escape the workplace in the event of an emergency. In some cases, employees are requested to activate manual pull stations or other alarm systems. Audible alarms can include bells, horns, sirens, and voice announcement systems. Only strobe lights are recognized by the National Fire Code and the Americans with Disabilities Act as a visual alarm. One note of caution: avoid using strobe devices that flash at rates greater than 5 flashes per second. It's been found that these high frequencies can trigger seizures in people who have certain forms of epilepsy. You should test your alarm systems at least twice per year and replace power supplies as often as necessary. Conduct periodic visual checks to ensure that devices are not obstructed or installed in a manner that would prevent sound or light from reaching all areas of the building. Remember to return alarm systems to normal operation after each test or activation. Training should be offered to employees when you develop your initial plan and during new employee orientation. Retraining should be conducted annually or when the plan is modified. Practice drills for evacuations and high-risk situations should be conducted as often as necessary to keep employees prepared. Include outside resources, such as fire and police departments when possible. Lastly, your emergency action plan should be reviewed and updated as needed. The written plan does not need to be housed on the work floor, but it should be located in a place where someone can access it in an emergency situation. Here are just a few additional resources we offer on these topics. If you have additional questions, contact your dedicated risk management professional or the corporate office.